I never thought a dinner at a French restaurant would be the night I finally understood what my daughter-in-law really thought of me. It was my son's 42nd birthday. Late October. The kind of evening where the air smells like fallen leaves and wood smoke, and you think to yourself, this is a good night. My son, I'll call him by what I always called him growing up, my sweetheart, my only boy, had made a reservation at a place called Maison Bleue, one of those restaurants downtown with white tablecloths and candles in little glass holders and a menu that doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. His wife, Renee, no wait, I'm sorry. Her name was, I'll call her my daughter-in-law. That's all she needs to be in this story. She had chosen the restaurant. She always chose everything. I want to be fair. I have spent the past year trying very hard to be fair about her. She is beautiful, educated, accomplished. She runs her own marketing firm. She wears the kind of blazers that cost more than my first car. My son looks at her the way my late husband used to look at me, like she hung every star herself. And for a long time, that was enough for me. More than enough. I loved her because he loved her. But there had been things. Small things, the kind you push down because you don't want to be that mother-in-law. The kind of woman who is never satisfied, who causes drama, who makes her son choose sides. I was not going to be that woman. I had promised myself that the day they got married, standing in the back of the church in my blue dress, holding my clutch so tightly, my knuckles went pale. I kept that promise for 4 years. I should tell you a little about myself before I get to that night. I'm 67 years old. I was a high school French teacher for 31 years, most of them at Jefferson High, right here in this same city where my son now lives. I retired 6 years ago, about 8 months after my husband passed. I live alone now in the house we bought together in 1989, a craftsman bungalow with a front porch I sit on every morning with my coffee, even in winter. I have a garden. I have a book club. I have a neighbor named Dot who brings me tomatoes in the summer and checks on me during snowstorms. My life is quiet, and I have made my peace with quiet. My daughter-in-law has never made peace with anything. She is the kind of person who is always moving, always optimizing, always looking at a situation and thinking about how it could be rearranged to better suit her. I noticed this early. The first Thanksgiving, she reorganized my kitchen while I was napping, then explained with a smile that the new layout was just more functional. The second Christmas, she suggested very gently that my traditional beef stew was a lot of food, and perhaps we could do something lighter. By the third year, she had started planning every family gathering herself, and I had somehow become a guest at events in my own son's home. I kept my mouth shut. I brought nice wine. I smiled. But that October, something changed. My son called me one afternoon, and he sounded the way he used to sound when he was a teenager who had done something wrong. A little too casual, a little too careful with his words. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something before Saturday." "Okay," I said. I was standing at my kitchen counter slicing an apple. I remember that clearly. "Renee thinks, and I think she might have a point, that it might be good for you to think about your long-term situation. You know, the house is a lot to maintain, and with winter coming." "My long-term situation," I repeated. "Just your options. There are some really wonderful places, Mom. Active senior communities. Some of them are like resorts, honestly. You'd have people around. I have people around. I know, but your father and I lived in that house for 34 years. There was a pause. "I know, Mom. We didn't argue. That wasn't how we operated. We said our goodbyes and hung up, and I stood there with my half-sliced apple and a feeling in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. The particular loneliness of realizing that someone you love is being slowly turned in a different direction, like a plant being rotated away from the window. I wondered where she had planted the idea. I wondered how long she had been watering it. Saturday came. I put on my good navy dress, the one my husband always said made my eyes look gray instead of blue, which he meant as a compliment, don't ask me why, and I drove myself downtown to Maison Bleue. The restaurant smelled of butter and thyme. The lighting was warm and low, and there were fresh flowers on every table, little sprigs of white something or other in bud vases. My son was already there, looking handsome in his sport coat, and he hugged me the moment I walked in. Whatever tension had lived in that phone call, he had set it down for the evening. He was good at that. He always had been. My daughter-in-law arrived 12 minutes later, which was not unusual. She arrived at things on her own clock. She kissed my cheek, left, right, the way people do when they've spent time in Europe, and told me I looked wonderful. She said it the way you say "what a cute dog" to someone you don't particularly like dogs. We ordered. The waiter was a young man with an accent I couldn't quite place, efficient and attentive. My son had the duck, I had the salmon. My daughter-in-law had a salad that I estimated cost $19 and contained approximately 8 leaves. For about 40 minutes, it was a perfectly pleasant dinner. We talked about my son's work. He was in commercial real estate, doing well, and about a trip they were apparently planning to Portugal in the spring, and about a television series they were watching that I had not seen. I laughed at the right moments. I asked questions. I was a good guest at my son's birthday dinner. Then my son excused himself to use the restroom. That was when my daughter-in-law's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, looked up at me, and said, "I'm sorry. I have to take this work thing. It'll just be a second." Then she switched to French. I want to tell you what that moment felt like. She had spoken French before around me. Little things. She had taken it in college, traveled to Paris twice, liked to use it when she was on calls she thought were sophisticated. And every time, she assumed I didn't understand, because why would she assume otherwise? I had never mentioned it. It had never come up. I was just my son's mother, the retired schoolteacher who grew up in Ohio and lived in a craftsman bungalow and brought nice wine to holidays. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at the bud vase on the table and listened. She was speaking to someone she called Cherie, a girlfriend, I gathered, someone named after a city, maybe. It was hard to tell. Her French was confident but not clean, American vowels under everything, but I understood every word. She said she was at dinner. She said the dinner was fine, the food was fine, my son was in a good mood. And then, and this is the part I have replayed in my mind so many times it has worn grooves, she said, "Oui, sa mère est là, comme d'habitude, elle s'accroche." His mother is here, as usual. She clings. She laughs softly. There was more. I won't give you every word, not because I've forgotten, but because some of it I still don't want to say out loud. She said she was working on it. She mentioned the senior community. She said she thought by spring she would have him convinced. She said, "Il l'aime, mais tu sais comment c'est avec les fils à maman." He loves her, but you know how it is with mama's boys. And then she said the thing that made me set down my water glass very carefully so I wouldn't drop it. She said, "Honnêtement, je pense qu'elle sera mieux là-bas, et nous aussi." Honestly, I think she'll be better off there, and so will we. My hands were completely still. I had the strange sensation of being outside my body, watching myself from somewhere near the ceiling, this 67-year-old woman in her navy dress, sitting alone at a white tablecloth table in a French restaurant while her daughter-in-law planned her removal from her own son's life like she was scheduling a furniture pickup. She wrapped up the call, slipped her phone into her little evening bag, looked up at me with a smile that was practiced and warm and completely hollow. "Sorry about that," she said. "Honestly, clients never respect weekends." "Oh, I completely understand," I said. My son came back to the table. The waiter brought dessert menus. My daughter-in-law leaned over and touched my son's arm and said, "The mousse looks incredible, doesn't it?" And he agreed, and I sat there with this strange calm settling over me like snow. I thought about my 31 years in a classroom. I thought about the hundreds of students I had taught, how you learn, as a teacher, to wait. You learn that the moment you lose your composure is the moment you lose the room. You wait, you choose your time. The waiter came to take dessert orders. My son ordered the chocolate mousse. My daughter-in-law ordered a single scoop of sorbet. I ordered the crème brûlée because it was my son's birthday, and I intended to enjoy myself. And then the waiter, this sweet young man, said something to her in French. A small comment about the sorbet. A flavor recommendation natural as breathing. She responded in French, brief, pleased with herself. And I said, also in French, clearly, carefully, in the accent I had spent 31 years perfecting, "Quelle belle soirée pour un anniversaire, n'est-ce pas?" What a lovely evening for a birthday, isn't it? I watched her face. I have seen many things in 67 years. I have seen the look on my husband's face when the doctor said the word terminal. I have seen my son's face the first time he rode a bike without training wheels, so lit up with pride it made my eyes sting. I have seen sunsets over Lake Michigan and the first snow of winter and the face of every student who ever understood something for the first time. The look on my daughter-in-law's face in that moment. I had never seen anything quite like it. It was not anger. It moved through her too fast for that. It was recognition. And then, underneath the recognition, something I can only describe as collapse. The way a wall looks for a split second before it falls, when you can see every crack all at once. "You," she started. "Speak French," I finished, very pleasantly. "Yes. 31 years teaching it, actually. Jefferson High. You might know it. It's about 3 miles from your office." My son was looking between us. "Wait, Mom, you speak French?" "I didn't know. You never asked, sweetheart." I smiled at him. Then I looked at my daughter-in-law. Not with anger. I had burned through the anger already, somewhere between the mousse and the crème brûlée. What was left was something quieter and I think more powerful. "Beautiful restaurant," I said. "Thank you for choosing it. The salmon was just wonderful." She didn't speak again for a long time. The waiter brought my crème brûlée. The candle on our table had burned low in its glass holder. My son kept glancing at her with a question forming in his eyes, the question getting bigger and more specific the more she didn't answer it. We drove home separately. She had told my son she needed to take another call in the car. I drove home on the highway with the windows cracked, even though it was cold, because I needed the air. I was shaking a little, not from crying or not only from crying, from the release of having held something down for a very long time. Like when you've been clenching a muscle you forgot was clenched. My son called me the next morning at 8:15. He got right to it, which told me she had told him at least some of it on the drive home. "Mom," he said, "I need to know what happened." I told him everything, not dramatically, not even particularly emotionally. I told him the way I used to tell my students a story when I wanted them to really hear it, plainly, without decoration, starting at the beginning. I told him about the phone call. I translated everything I had understood. When I got to El Sacroche, I stopped and let him sit with it for a moment. He was quiet for a long time. "Mom," he said finally, and his voice was different, lower. The voice of a man who is rearranging something very large inside himself. "I'm not angry," I told him, and I meant it. "I am not asking you to choose. I would never ask you to choose, but I need you to know what I heard, and I need you to decide, for yourself, not for me, not for her, what you want to do with that." Another long silence. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I know, I didn't, I wouldn't have. The senior community thing, I thought it was just." "I know," I said again. "I know you didn't see it the way I saw it. Does it make you feel better if I tell you I'm not going to bring that up again?" I almost laughed. "A little," I admitted. What happened next between my son and his wife is theirs. I am not telling their story. I will tell you that there were several weeks of quiet that felt different from ordinary quiet, the way the air feels different before a storm than it does after one. I will tell you that my daughter-in-law showed up at my door one afternoon in November with a bottle of wine and an expression I had never seen on her before. Unguarded. Exhausted, almost. I let her in. I got 2 glasses from the cabinet my husband had built with his own hands in 1994. We sat at my kitchen table, the one with the burn mark near the edge from a candle left too long at Christmas 30 years ago, and she poured. She did not apologize right away. I could see her working up to it, rehearsing, abandoning the rehearsed version, starting over. I gave her time. That is something I have learned. Time is not always delay. Sometimes time is the most respectful thing you can offer. When she finally spoke, she didn't give me the polished version. She gave me something rawer. She said she knew it was not enough to say she was sorry. She said she had built a story about me in her head. Difficult, clingy, too present, and had been living inside that story so long she had stopped questioning it. She said she was ashamed of what I'd heard, and she was more ashamed of the fact that she'd meant it when she said it. I looked at her across my kitchen table. The wine was a nice red, something French I noticed. I couldn't tell if that was intentional or if she hadn't made the connection. Maybe both. "Why did you want to move me out?" I asked. It was the question I had been carrying since that phone call, but I asked it genuinely, not accusingly. I actually wanted to know. She wrapped both hands around her wine glass, the way people do when they're cold or nervous. "I think," she said slowly, "I was afraid he loved you more than he loved me, and I didn't know what to do with that except make you smaller." I sat with that for a moment. It was not the answer I expected. It was more honest than I expected. "He loves me differently," I told her. "What he feels for you is not the same category of thing as what he feels for me. There's room for all of it. There always was." She nodded. She was crying a little by then. Quietly, not dramatically. The good kind of crying, if there is such a thing. The kind that means something is actually being let go. I am not going to tell you we became best friends. That is not the story I'm telling, and it wouldn't be true. What I will tell you is that Thanksgiving that year was the first holiday in 4 years where I felt like I was actually in the room, where she asked me, genuinely, about my year's teaching, where she told me, unprompted, that she had looked up Jefferson High and noticed I had been nominated for the State Teacher of the Year award in 2007. Where my son watched the two of us and didn't look like a man standing between two countries anymore. After dinner, while my son was washing dishes, he always washed dishes. It was one of his best qualities, and I told him so every time. She came and stood beside me at the window in the living room, where I was watching the streetlights come on one by one down the block. "I looked up Maison Bleu's menu after," she said quietly. "They had a French description on the sorbet. I didn't know that's what it said." I said nothing, just waited. "I ordered lavender," she said. "I thought I was ordering chocolate. And I don't know why, but that broke something open in me. The absurdity of it, the humanness of it, and I laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one, and after a second she laughed too. There is something I want to say to whoever is watching this and nodding along, because I think I know who you are. I think you are sitting somewhere, maybe on a couch in a house that feels too quiet, maybe in a room full of people who seem to look right through you, and you are wondering if you have become invisible, if somewhere along the way, without anyone announcing it, moved to a different category. Support character instead of main character, background instead of foreground, there instead of present. I want to tell you, you are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not too old to matter, too slow to keep up, too much to deal with. You have 30, 40, 50 years of living stored in you, joy and grief and hard-won wisdom and love that has survived things most people haven't been tested by yet. You do not have to shrink to fit the space someone else has decided to allow you. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply be exactly who you are in the most unexpected moment, and let that be enough. I drove home from Thanksgiving with a full stomach and a box of leftovers on my passenger seat, and the heat on low and the radio playing something from the 70s that I knew every word to. The streets were quiet and orange-lit and cold. I thought about my husband. I thought about how he would have handled all of it, probably less patiently than I did, honestly. He was a gentleman, but not a quiet one. He would have said something at the restaurant, probably something that would have embarrassed my son and maybe fixed things faster and definitely made for a better story. I smiled at the windshield. I thought about the way my daughter-in-law had laughed at the lavender sorbet, genuinely, helplessly, the way you laugh when something surprises you into it. I thought about how that laugh was the first real thing I had ever seen her. The first moment where the blazer and the practiced smile and the optimization dropped away and there was just a person, embarrassed and imperfect and real. I thought, maybe that's where we start. My porch light was on when I got home. I always leave it on. My husband started that habit, so the house looks lived in, he used to say, so it looks like someone's home, and I have kept it ever since, for 14 years without him, this small yellow light burning steadily in the dark. I sat in the car for a moment before going in. The leftover stuffing smelled incredible. The radio finished its song. I was home. I was wanted. And in the morning, I would make my coffee and sit on my porch and watch the neighborhood wake up, the same as I always do, the same as I hope to do for a very long time yet. That was enough. That was more than enough.